Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. In today's show, we're going to take a look at the new and used car markets, how dealers are performing, the latest on used car prices, and discuss some predictions for the months ahead. Now, joining me to speak more on this is Auto Trader's Chief Operating Officer, Catherine Faiers. Hello, Catherine.
Hi, James. Great to be here again.
Yeah, always good to have you on, Catherine. Thank you for taking some time to speak to us today. Now, it's always good to get your view on what you're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. And I mean, there is so much going on, isn't there? And of course, the economy obviously is in the limelight at the moment. There's a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I mean, given your position in the marketplace, you've obviously got a lot of data. And what's that data showing? Well, what's that data telling you at the moment?
That's a great first question. Well, I think when we look at the data and what it's telling us, I don't think the data is as bad as some of the headlines might suggest, particularly the headlines on the macroeconomic environment and cost of living pressures. The market is definitely softened, particularly from the levels we were seeing last year, but overall it actually remains a pretty robust used car market. We're still seeing engagement levels well ahead of 2019 volume, so prior to the pandemic. We're still seeing 64 million odd visits a month, all-time retailer highs on our marketplace. Used car sales, that demand we have seen in the used car sales data was not quite translating through in all segments of stock to transaction data. Transactions were down in Q2. But interestingly, when you look at that data segmented, you can see that actually transactions for 5 years and older cars were up quite strongly. So where the supply of vehicles is there and is available in the market, actually demand's pretty strong and pretty good. It's the sub 5-year-old vehicle category where we've now seen multiple years of weak new car transactions beginning to play through into that supply volume. That's where we're seeing transactions down, but the supply isn't there for that transaction volume to persist. So overall, the kind of headlines, I think, hide a bit of the underlying story and what's actually going on in automotive. And automotive as a category so far, I think, has been insulated to some extent from some of the bigger, very significant macro shifts that we've seen.
Yeah, I entirely understand what you're saying, because I mean the S&T used car figures came out not too long ago, and of course they said the number of transactions was down, and I think people were very quick to comment on that, saying, well, there you are then, that's the used car market on its downward sort of trajectory. It's not really that, is it? I mean, there's little pockets of demand in different places, but generally speaking, people still want to buy cars. It's just that there aren't the cars for them to buy in many cases.
I think it's partly that we'd all got used to as well, when we weren't in lockdowns and when we emerged from those lockdowns during that pandemic period, we had got used to very, very strong surges in demand, and almost a new normal had been set where the speed at which cars were selling was very fast, pricing growth was very strong, consumer demand was very strong, and we were always going to see some softening from those very strong and high periods. What's happened is, I think, some of that softening's played out at the same time as we've been in the summer here in the UK, which would typically be a bit softer in terms of consumer demand. And then we've had these macro factors playing in and a series of one-off events as well. So actually unpicking what is one-off impacts of world events versus what's a structural shift in consumer demand, it's quite difficult. But overall, we are seeing, I think, what we would describe as a softer market than it has been, but still a pretty robust market, and one where prices are stable, demand is pretty good, not as strong as it was, and the supply side is actually the big structural factor that is driving most, I think, of the transaction and other data that we're then seeing.
Yeah. I mean, this sort of answer changes depending on who you ask it to, but I think dealers, we've been talking to a lot of dealers, and a lot of dealers say there's a price crash on the way, get set, it's going to cut, the prices are going to come tumbling down. Judging by what you've said and the conversations I've had with other leading names in the business, a crash definitely isn't going to, well, not definitely, but it's very unlikely to happen, isn't it? Because of all the factors you've just said, it's just a softening, isn't it? And what with prices being so high last year, there's going to have to be a huge event for prices to come crashing down to levels pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Because if any of us have been forecasters for the last 3 to 5 years, I'm not sure any of us would have been very accurate. But we are, I think we're feeling confident, more confident than we probably ever have in our valuations data, because we now see close to 1 million price movements every day, not just on Auto Trader, from the OEM data sets we see, the fleet and leasing data set. So we've got this huge data set that means that we have a very rich data set to mine and to gather insight from, and to play that back and share that as regularly as we can with retailers and customers. We're also feeling good about the fact we're now powering the consumer price index. Thankfully, we are not responsible for some of the trends we're seeing in energy and other sectors, but at least the used car data is now being captured as part of that story. And prices still at the moment remain up about 16% year on year. So we are still at record highs in terms of the year on year increases. And I think we've talked about over the summer us seeing some stabilization and normalization in the pricing trends. The things we've been talking about most, or the data point we've been focused on most, is actually the month-on-month movements that we're seeing. So the movement in prices from June into July, from July into August, and then August into September. And we've looked back over the last 10 to 15 years at those month-on-month movements to try and get a sense of what would be normal for used car pricing trends. And actually the last 3 months have tracked very, very consistently with the pre-pandemic norms in terms of month-on-month price movements. So there's nothing that we're seeing in the data at the moment that suggests we're about to see any big correction or any big one-off adjustment in those pricing trends. I think, as ever, the caveat is if there was a big supply side impetus, if there was a big injection of supply into the market. Now, we're not seeing anything that suggests in the next 6 months that that's likely. We're seeing pockets of supply returning, very much manufacturer by manufacturer, or a big demand side shock. And so far, we've seen consumer affordability, consumer approval rates remain actually pretty robust when it comes to used car transactions and used car affordability. So there's nothing at the moment in the demand or supply side that suggests, certainly in the midterm, the next 6 months or so, that there'll be any big correction or shock.
I know you say automotive is sort of largely protected at the moment from wider sort of macroeconomic factors, but we all know cost of living crisis is only going to get worse. Are you starting to see some of the effects of that? Perhaps consumers' budgets are starting to be a little bit more constrained, or is that still further down the line, do you think?
So we're not seeing it yet. We're not seeing it in either our consumer research when we're asking consumers sentiment towards ownership. Are you looking in different price bands? Have you changed your purchasing behavior as a result of the cost of living crisis? We're not seeing any meaningful changes there, and we're not yet seeing it in the distribution of consumers engaging with different vehicles in different price bands on Auto Trader. At the moment, we put that down to a combination of about 2/3 of consumers coming to market with a part exchange, a vehicle that they're looking to trade in, which means that the price of that car should have experienced the same type of inflation that used cars have also seen. So that helps insulate them a bit from the affordability impact. We're also seeing still that for consumers that are in market to buy a car, they're typically more likely to be from slightly higher income demographics. And those income demographics have, again, so far been insulated from some of the more extreme impacts of energy price inflation in particular. So actually savings levels, deposit levels are still within those cohorts of consumers slightly stronger actually than they were prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. And
finally, when it comes to finance, we've seen actually some of the finance companies in automotive, again, insulating consumers a bit from some of the base rate increases we've seen in the last few months. And because residual values have stayed pretty robust, the increase in monthly finance payments is actually much lower than the increase we've seen in the headline used car value. So there are a number of factors at the moment so far for consumers that mean that some of the more extreme impacts of those pricing movements haven't played through in a material way. Now, clearly, we're tracking the data, we're tracking those engagement surveys very, very closely, and we'll continue to share and see how the market evolves in that regard in the coming months.
Would you say that's the same situation for electric vehicles as well? Obviously the macroeconomics of high energy prices, there's an assumption that that's going to affect particularly used EVs. Is it still too early to say that? And I mean, are consumers, is there still a high propensity of those still wishing to buy used electric cars at the moment?
Absolutely, we still see very strong demand for used EVs, a combination of environmental concerns, all the headlines around fuel prices specifically. I know there's been some reversals of trends in the last few weeks, but typically the headlines have been more sensational around fuel than they have around electricity costs and the cost of charging an electric vehicle so far. And we still see, with those strong demand side trends, we still see a really relatively small proportion of used car supply of EVs into market. So actually, given that relatively small supply, demand is still significantly outstripping the supply that is there. So overall, battery electric vehicles in particular are still some of the fastest selling cars that we see on Auto Trader.
That's very interesting. I mean, Auto Trader you guys are talking to retailers all of the time. I mean, therefore, you can take a sort of temperature check of what's happening. What are retailers most concerned about at the moment? Is it the demand? Is it the supply? Is it prices? I mean, or is it a combination of all of those things?
I think inevitably it's a bit of a combination of all of them, depending on who you talk to. I think the one big thing that I think that is common to all of us operating in the industry is the pace of change that we're now seeing and experiencing, not just the one-off worldwide events that we're all having to figure out very rapidly how we respond to, but also just the pace within the market. So we're seeing more cars added to Auto Trader, being removed from Auto Trader each day, really significantly higher levels than we were seeing previously. Encouraging because speed of sales still pretty good, but also lots more cars coming to market. And then we're also seeing a lot more pricing changes. So we're seeing a significant increase in the number of pricing decisions being made by retailers. Now we're seeing more price increases as well as decreases. So it's not all retailers looking to reduce prices by any means, but we're seeing retailers coming to market and thinking about price more regularly. Yeah. So you combine those one-off events with actually the pace at which retailers are having to react, the need for data, the need for that continuous trading mentality, and the pace at which decision-making is required is just accelerated, and we're seeing it continuing to accelerate, I think. So the need for data, the need for automation, the need for technology has never been greater. I think we're also, so you've got pace of change, we're then also seeing the big structural changes play out that all retailers are having to figure out how they respond to, whether that's consumers doing more of the jobs online. So we're still seeing a lot more leads, digital leads being sent to retailers. We're seeing more jobs being done online, even if the transactions ultimately completed on the forecourt, and most journeys are absolutely still omni-channel journeys. We're also then seeing electrification, as we were just talking about, and retailers needing to think about their strategy when it comes to electric vehicles. Are they going to be early adopters? Are they going to embrace this trend, or are they deliberately going to find other segments or pockets of the market to focus on? And then we've got the impact of those supply side factors playing through into sourcing decisions, with retailers often having to rethink where they want to play in terms of age of vehicle or condition of vehicle, just to make sure that they're responding to the vehicles that are out there and available for them to source. So lots of pace of change overall short term, but then lots of big structural changes that retailers are having to grapple with and navigate their way through as well.
Yeah, I mean, given all of those challenges, what is Auto Trader doing to help retailers in pretty, challenging times?
I think, as ever, with all of that change comes opportunity, or always, doesn't it? Because the market's evolving, the market's changing. Retailers that can respond to that change should put themselves in a really good position. And our main focus is helping retailers to get the data and insight they need to figure out the right strategy for them. And it will be bespoke to them. It can only be bespoke to them. We've done a combination of combining our market insights, so the supply, demand data, into our packages, so every retailer has access to that. We launched our Auto Trader Connect product last year, and that's, I think, a brilliant example of the type of thing we can do, where we can use our technology and our data to solve problems for the industry or challenges that the industry needs to address. That one was clearly all around having a live view of stock across Auto Trader systems, retailer systems, third-party dealer management systems. And we know from the retailers that have adopted it, have embraced it, they're saving time, they're saving money, they're selling cars faster, they're able to price a lot more accurately. We're also at the moment got a big focus on making our valuations data even more accurate. So we're working with the OEMs, the manufacturers, to make sure that we have the VIN, so the detailed build specification data, available for hopefully all cars in time on our platform. So again, it just should help retailers to price more accurately, for the optional extras, the trim data to be automatically populated into their systems, again saving time, saving effort for retailers, and enabling them to price more accurately. And over time, we want to make our valuations more accurate, but we want to increasingly surface them in more of the systems that we provide to retailers, but in more of their dealer management and other systems as well. I think that technology and data that we can bring and help the industry to solve big challenges that are easy if there's someone sitting in the middle of it to connect these different players and partners. I think that's hopefully one of the most powerful things we can do to support.
Yeah, and more transparency for the consumer as well, isn't it? And it's just building that trust between the dealer and the consumer ultimately, isn't it?
Absolutely. And as we're seeing consumers doing more and more online, for them to have confidence to ultimately do more of that journey online, they need to know that the car that they're looking at on Auto Trader is on a retailer's forecourt, and that they can still buy it, is still available. They need to have confidence in the price, that the price really does reflect the actual specification of the car, and that it's not going to change or not going to need to be haggled or negotiated. So absolutely, confidence in the vehicle, confidence in the price are all things that we can help to solve through data and through technology.
Yeah. Well, looking further ahead then, we're in the autumn now, slightly quieter part of the year we're approaching. I mean, what are the things dealers can do? Any advice? And also, I'm going to ask you for a crystal ball here moment. I don't know whether it's too early, but what are your thoughts for the early part of 2023?
So in terms of today and what we're doing today, and how we're helping retailers to find the things they should be focusing on right now to drive performance in their business, we've actually created what we've called a Focus Finder tool, which brings together our most powerful data to help customers decide exactly where to focus their energy and try and drive better business results for them. So we've got all of our 200-odd strong team of account managers and performance partners working with retailers to understand their goals, to look at our data on their price position, on their stock turn, on their sourcing strategy, to then identify for those individual retailers what the next most important priority should be. Is it looking at price position? Is it looking at sourcing strategy? Is it looking at advertising quality on Auto Trader? And we know from those conversations that we are really able to help drive better performance for those customers. So we want to work with all of our customers to do this. We've worked with a few hundred so far. We want to get into the thousands pretty quickly, and ultimately we want to reach all of our customers with that conversation. When it comes to a bit further out and looking beyond the next few months, I mean, I hope when we head into 2023, we'll see new car stock continuing to slowly recover. We're seeing some signs of it returning now, but hopefully that trend will continue. And I think as long as it continues, that we're seeing pockets of supply by OEM, actually with demand where it is, we'll be able to absorb that and still have a robust used car market. I hope that consumer demand continues to be insulated to some extent from the more extremes of the current cost of living crisis. I think inevitably that will get a bit harder depending on where inflation trends, interest rates trend. But for now, we're seeing a number of reasons why automotive has been more insulated than some other categories. And one interesting thing we have seen in the last few months, and I don't know how this will play out, but the public transport chaos we've seen across the UK, whether it's been rail strikes, tube strikes, airport chaos, well, in our sentiment trackers for consumers, that is now becoming an increasing and another reason why car ownership is really important to them, because many of them are now saying that they don't feel like they can rely on public transport for those all important journeys. So it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to trend and play out over the winter. We're also seeing longest ever still wait for car driving tests, huge pipeline of new potential drivers coming through there, and overall sentiment towards ownership remains strong. So I'm reasonably optimistic, but also realistic, I think, as well, about what might happen on the demand side.
Yeah, that was a very interesting last point, actually. I hadn't considered that, but yes, I think that's one to keep an eye on for sure. Catherine, thank you so much for coming on. Some great stuff there. Always good to have a chat. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.